2, 1. Welcome to Dino-Brains, episode 1, and it's April the 10th, 2019. So we got everybody with us. We got Paige Riggs. We got Pat Miller. We have Fidel Miranda, who's having some technology issues.
Because he's a dinosaur.
Working on that. But this is the first broadcast. And so what we're trying to do with the broadcast is kind of reach out to the EMS community in a kind of a relaxed setting. But what we want to talk about, though, is the science behind what we do. It's going to be maybe an informal way for everybody kind of to get together and talk about some of the issues that we're facing out there. And there's several. And me and Paige Riggs, we're EMS instructors. We have an EMT class for DeKalb County Fire Rescue. And so we teach several EMT classes, and I really think this will be kind of good for them too, because we'll talk about issues maybe that they're covering in their book. But I'd like to get Paige to kind of introduce herself, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get to Pat next. Afternoon, Paige.
Afternoon, Mike. Thanks. So I don't know if I'm really part of the dinosaurs of EMS since I'm the youngest one here, but I think based on time, I fit that category of over 15 years as a paramedic. So, but yeah, I'm here working with Mike, teaching the EMT class, and hopefully we can get some information spread out and just get some ideas that we've learned and different perspectives from other people and bring some other people in throughout time. So,
excellent. So which brings us to Pat Miller.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Mike and Paige and Fidel. I'm just happy to be here. Been here. I just celebrated my 26th year at DeKalb here. Have enjoyed every bit of it. Happy and honored to be here on the podcast today.
And we're glad to have you, Pat. We really are. So tell us, Pat, a little bit about kind of like what you're doing now for DeKalb, because I know you recently transferred up to headquarters. So yeah. What's your new title and position, and kind of what kind of work are you doing?
I don't really have a title, but basically I am assisting Chief Kimberly Unangst with, she's in charge of our newly formed EMS division. And so I'm just helping her with some things. We're trying to get the EMS division up and running. And so that's part of the process. I'm part of that, trying to just assist her with whatever. Right now, we are working on updating our patient care guidelines, and we're anticipating those coming out very soon, maybe by the end of the spring or early summer. And of course, that's all pending approval by our new medical director. And that's been an exciting process. That's required a lot of research, and I've learned a lot just working on that.
I can't imagine working in any position where you're starting up from the ground level in EMS service. The amount of work involved in that it has to be overwhelming.
Yes, it is. There's, the patient care guidelines is just one aspect of it. There's also issues with, we're looking at hiring new personnel, hiring new paramedics to come and staff the ambulances. There's some things working with our logistics officers, Captain Dobson and Chief Smith, as far as new equipment and the new ambulances that are going to be coming. And we're looking at all kinds of things like that. So it's a process, and it doesn't always move as fast as we'd like, but that's understandable, I guess. It requires money and requires a lot of resources and everything to start something like that.
I bet. So I probably need to say something about myself. I didn't really introduce myself out there for the 4 people who might watch this. But I guess, Mom, you already know who I am.
I hope she does.
Yeah. She claims me some days she doesn't. But no, I'm Mike Morse, and I've been at DeKalb County Fire Rescue 17 years. Recently transferred up to training about 2 years ago. I work with, like I said, I work with Paige in initial education for EMT. But now back to kind of you guys, and throw this out there. We were talking, Pat, about when we first got in the job.
Yes.
Into EMS, and we were talking about the changes, and it kind of really was kind of hit me when I was teaching this to our EMT students in chapter 1, and we were talking about it and all the changes, but we've seen quite a few changes in just the last 10 or 15 years. I mean, from equipment like cardiac monitors that we were talking about earlier. I mean, we really thought we were something when we got the LifePak 10s.
Yeah.
And from 5 to 10s to, you know, what we're using today. Also, STEMI Care came out while we were, most of us first hit the streets, calling a STEMI alert. That was a new thing.
Absolutely.
Calling, and then between STEMI alerts, stroke alerts, all of that was, you know, changing right when we, at least right when I first became a paramedic, with the, you know, changing over to doing 12 leads even. And kind of wanted to see, maybe you had some stuff you wanted to talk about, maybe some of the changes that you've seen.
Oh, thank you, Mike. Yes, I agree with you. I remember, you know, we were never taught 12 lead EKG recognition in paramedic school. We had no idea, you know, coming out of paramedic school, what an MI looked like, you know, and looking at a 12 lead and being able to interpret, you know, which leads represented which areas of the heart, which coronary arteries were affected. And I remember when I first came to DeKalb was actually one of the very first services in Georgia to have a 12 lead EKG ready monitor. I think Fayette County and DeKalb County were part of a program that Emory University was actually sponsoring, and they called it Code Gray. And basically what we learned is how to hook up the 12 lead EKG, where the electrode placement was. We didn't learn how to read the 12 lead. We just learned how to place the electrodes, and then we would transmit that EKG to Emory University if we had a patient we thought might be having an MI. You know, they had, you know, chest pain and so forth, and we would transmit those 12 leads, and then the physician would actually interpret the 12 lead.
Wow.
But it's amazing to me, you know, the education in EMS moves so fast. And I know you guys can relate to that. You know, the textbook we had, the paramedic textbook we had is probably about half as thick as the EMT textbook is today. I'm just really earlier I was down here and you guys were talking about explaining preload and afterload to your EMT class. Right. And I thought, wow, if you asked me to explain that right now, I'd fumble through it. I wouldn't be able to do it. I thought that was amazing that the EMTs are actually learning that. And I remember when I first got out in the field talking to some of the veteran paramedics that I looked up to, you know, and they had been in the field for several years.
Right.
And they were taught how to do something, but not really why they were doing that. You know, they said, I know to give this drug and this drug and this drug, but I don't really know why I'm giving that drug.
Right.
You know, and today we're learning it on a cellular level. So it's really,
that's crazy, isn't it?
Really amazing how much we've progressed in just a few decades.
Paige, I don't know if you remember, but when I first got into it, we didn't have protocols. You had to call the hospital. If you're going to a cardiac arrest, you would call the hospital and say, hey, look, this is rescue whoever. We're en route to cardiac arrest. We'd like to request ACLS orders.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And they would say, yeah, go ahead with ACLS orders. I remember as a paramedic having to call for permission just to start an IV.
Yep.
My, how things have changed.
They have certainly changed. Speaking of change, Paige, me and you were talking about this earlier. Kind of like to get your buy-in, Pat, on they're talking about here in Georgia and several other states about making the paramedic a degree, making it a requirement to have a degree in paramedicine, and which I haven't been able to really kind of get into the meat and potatoes of it. But what do you think about that? Can you hear me? Miller.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mike. I was waiting on Paige to respond.
Okay, or Paige. Either one of you guys can comment on it.
I mean, I will. I don't
mind. Go ahead, Paige. Lead us off because we talked about it earlier.
All right.
What are you thinking about that?
So I actually like this idea. I like the idea of sending paramedics to at least an associate level degree. I'm going actually through that program currently where I'm taking my prereqs and everything to get an associate's level of paramedicine. It will give us more parity towards nursing, where nursing is a minimum requirement of an associate level degree for an ADN, where we would increase pay and then have more of a professional outlook instead of, hey, I went to a technical school and here's your certificate or your diploma, where you weren't required to take a high-level English or a high-level math class. And by having more education, you justify your worth, not only through pay, but through respect in a field and also justification of our job, because we're doing a lot of things independently that most nurses will never do in a hospital on their own without a doctor's orders. Working in an ER, I see this every day. They have to wait for specific orders to do certain things, even though they have their own protocol set like we do. But we work independently without that consult 5 feet away within the same building. We have to call and get that if we really need it. And I think independence, if we really want to say that we're an independent entity, we need to increase our educational worth.
Yeah, I'm kind of right there with you on that too, Paige. What about it, Pat? What do you think?
Oh, I totally agree with Paige. And I think that also that with having an advanced education like that and actually having a degree, that's going to open the door for an expanded scope of practice for paramedics, especially for paramedics like Paige who's going through this program. I think that's going to open the door for paramedics to be able to do more. If they've acquired that degree level, they're going to be able to do more. Perhaps maybe something close to the level of what a nurse practitioner does for certain subset of patients. Something else that I really think that might happen, I don't know if we'll see it, but I think something that might happen, if you look at the fire service, how it has progressed as well, and we have so many specialty teams. We have hazmat specialists, we have technical rescue specialists, we have dive specialists, and there's all these different subsets of specialties. I see that happening in EMS as well. I think one day we're going to have something like a cardiac arrest resuscitation unit.
Oh, wow.
And it might actually have, be equipped with, a paramedic that rides that they just have some kind of a special training in cardiac arrest management. And they're going to go to, calls like that. I don't know if that's going to happen anytime in the near future, but I see that happening eventually. And, just with, one of the buzzwords around EMS right now is community paramedicine. And paramedics are going out and doing, things that we didn't really think we'd ever, would do, as far as, going out and seeing people like almost like a doctor's visit. But I think that might be a good thing, though.
Yeah. Fidel, can you hear us yet?
I can hear you.
Awesome.
I hear you, Fidel. I hear you.
I reverted to my phone.
Oh, really?
Well, welcome. We're glad to have you on board.
Oh, Lord.
Glad to have you. Fidel, we kind of introduced ourselves kind of at the beginning. You want to kind of introduce yourself and tell everybody out there who you are, a little something about yourself?
No problem. My name is Fidel Miranda. I'm I guess what we used to be called fire medics. No longer that title is no longer available to us any longer. Anyways, I've been up at the training academy for about 5 years, I think. Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you a little bit. Volume's kind of low.
Let me try turning it up.
Okay.
Right.
All right, it's getting better.
Has a good hairline, Fidel.
Well,
Oh, yeah, I like that.
I have to hold the phone.
Yeah.
Where did you guys not? Where did I leave off?
What'd you say, Fidel?
This isn't working very well, is it?
No, I can hear you. I can hear you pretty well, Fidel.
Oh, good.
Okay. Good. Again, well, I'll start over. I'm Fidel Miranda. I've been with the county for almost 10 years. I come from Kansas City, Missouri. I worked there for almost 20 years, probably, or 17, 18 years. By the good graces, I ended up in Georgia about 10 years ago. And I've loved it. I've loved every minute I've been here. The last 5 years have been spent in the training department with you fine folks. And we're glad to have Pat.
Thank you.
We love us some Pat Miller up here at DeKalb County.
Yeah.
So just to kind of fill you in, Fidel, we were just talking about the paramedics, the degree program that they're talking about, making it a requirement for paramedics to have a degree. And Pat was talking about community paramedicine and how that kind of could how the degree program could kind of shift that way a little bit. Yeah, so it's definitely going to be challenging for any state to do the curriculum, to put this together, to require a degree. I'm all for it. In my opinion, I love it. I think here in Georgia, where we're broadcasting from, Clayton County, right next door to us, they're using PAs on their EMS units.
Wow. And they have several nurse practitioners as well.
And nurse practitioners too, right?
Yeah.
And they're doing community paramedicine with that program. That's very interesting. I talked to Chief Grimaldi out there, and because I kind of thought it was a grant, and I kind of thought it would run out, pretty soon. But it's not a grant. That's taxpayer dollars for that program.
That's awesome.
They're paying us. The PAs and nurse practitioners are doing 24 on, 48 off, and bringing a salary over around $100,000 a year, from what I've been told. So, it's just with that, we can tell that the education is ramping up in our industry. It's going to be different. I think in 10 years, Pat, it's going to change a lot. I think we're fixing to see a growth that we saw. There was like that first 5 years in the street as a paramedic, maybe 6. I went from a Life Pack 5 to a Life Pack 10 to a Life Pack 12, doing STEMI alerts, stroke alerts, and all that changed in a short period of time. I think we're fixing to see a different type of growth that's going to lead us to EMS looking quite different.
Oh, absolutely. I'm amazed at how fast the technology and the education actually moves. It's really hard to keep up with. You have to, if you get online and look at, some of the periodicals, Journal of Emergency Medical Services, EMS World, EMS1.com. Now there's another one. It's called Paramedic Chief. It's for administrators for EMS services and so forth. And even the fire periodicals address EMS issues.
Right.
And you could literally spend your off day for 8 hours just looking at things, and it'd still be hard to keep up to date with some of the newest trends and technologies.
Fidel, you ever worked for a funeral home EMS service?
But I do. I think one of the biggest benefits of this new program that the states are hopefully they're all in on it is it's going to legitimize our profession.
There you go.
Yeah.
The biggest thing, I think that's going to be the greatest benefit, and my family still thinks this is a kid job for me, or they still believe it. I have one family member who always asks me, when am I When am I going to get a real job?
I remember you telling me that. Yeah, it's definitely changed. I mean, I've worked for funeral home EMS service. I've worked for hospital-based EMS service. I've worked for the mom and pops that were bought by, the big conglomerate AMRs and rural metros.
Yeah.
I've worked rural. I've worked everywhere, pretty much, and it's been great. It's been a great experience since I've been doing this job, but it's different. It's going to be different. I really think that there's going to be a level of things that we're going to start doing in the field in the next 10 years. It's going to be quite advanced.
I would love for us to go to handheld blood monitoring devices, basically.
Right.
It's called an iStat. We can perform that here under our scope of practice in the state of Georgia. We can go ahead and draw all those lab work. We can have a chemistry done and a troponin run on every chest pain patient before they ever get to the hospital. And you can do both of those in 12 minutes. And just by having a chemistry or a troponin, we can rule out, do we need to go straight to that cath lab right this minute based on the EKG? And we have supporting documentation for cardiac enzymes being elevated, or if it's a stroke patient, we've already got that creatinine level to make sure that they can take the dye for a CAT scan with contrast, and their kidneys are functioning appropriately. So instead of having to delay that care, we can increase door to needle time or door to cath time exponentially, even though a lot of the hospitals in the area still take just the EKG as our word. Sometimes there's still that delay because they want to get that blood work. And if we already have that drawn and done, we can do that. But the thing is, it requires a copy for the system to work, for a copy of your diploma or your transcripts. But by having an associate level degree, it's going to be a little bit easier as well, because nursing just goes, okay, you can do that, where we, through the state, would have to get more approval and things like that and be trained by the medical director and so on, even though it's within our scope of practice.
Right. Yeah. I remember we went to the NAMSES in Cobb County a couple months ago, right? And one of the talks was about 12 lead EKGs and calling your STEMI alert. And it's funny, even after all these years, we're still having problems activating the cath lab.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, that would be quite interesting, though, to be able to have a positive troponin and call that in as well. Well, if we have a inferior MI with a positive troponin, that would be quite.
That's a game.
That would be really cool. What's that, Fidel?
I said that's a game changer.
That is a game changer.
Oh, yeah. And it can also rule out any false positive EKGs we may have due to possible interference by being on the road or patient movement or anything like that, because we've got solid evidence that there's cardiac damage occurring right now in real time, and say their troponin is elevated. It's over 0.07. We know there's cardiac damage involvement, ischemia going on. We need to stop it and just have that right now, instead of, some paramedics still struggle with the J curve and things like that with ST elevation. Sure. And sometimes it could be hard to rule out, especially if you're going down the road and you see changes on an EKG. You don't know sometimes based on artifact. And you go ahead and call it in and say, you know what, it's better to be safe than sorry. Well, now I've got proof. Yeah.
That's a fantastic idea. I was reading today about one of the main ways that actual congestive heart failure is diagnosed is by looking at some of the lab values, and specifically the I can't ever say the word right, but it's brain something natriuretic. It's the BNP. Okay, the BNP. And the same thing, if you look at a pulmonary embolism, they look at the D dimer, And so those are two very life-altering, potentially life-threatening conditions.
Oh yeah.
That's going to help us, be conclusive about our not our diagnosis, but our assessment, and calling those in. I was talking to Captain Donahue the other day. Had a really good conversation with him. He's a greatly respected paramedic here at DeKalb, and we were having a conversation just by email, and we were talking about pulmonary embolus. And this was something I just wanted to bring up, just kind of interesting to me. So we talk about a stroke and calling a stroke alert. Okay, so a stroke is basically, an ischemic stroke is an occlusion of a cerebral artery. And then we call in a STEMI, and that's an occlusion of a coronary artery. Well, a pulmonary embolus is an occlusion of a pulmonary artery. And so, we got the brain block, we got the heart block, now we got the lung block, but we don't really have some type of alert system, if you will, to call that in. And it seems like that the same treatment that applies to a stroke and a STEMI also applies here with a pulmonary embolus. It's, that's either going to be TPA or an endovascular procedure. And maybe that'll be the next big thing, will be the pulmonary, the PE alert.
I would like to see that, but I think the hardest thing is the differential diagnosis, even in the hospital, is only through a D-dimer being elevated and then a CT angio of the chest. And those are very, very time consuming. So just a positive elevated D-dimer doesn't necessarily indicate they have one. It just means they have an increased clotting factor. And I think once they're able to kind of shorten the length of time they can get this information, at least at the hospital clinical setting, and then get it to us, I think would probably vastly improve these, because we have a lot of women who go for anxiety and chest pain. They end up dying from pulmonary embolisms later on.
Right.
But I think it's just the differential diagnosis time is just so long, even in a clinical hospital setting, that we've just got to bring that time down there before it can come down to us. And I think we're still a few years away from that. I see. But I would love to see it. I do agree with you, though.
Is that something that ISTAT can pick up, Paige, or is that something beyond abilities?
I know ISTAT could do a PT and a PT INR, but I'm not sure of D-dimer status. I think that's going to be a little bit harder, but we could at least get a PT INR, which will at least indicate that we're having some sort of clotting issue or bleeding issue through platelets and things like that. So we at least have an initial indication.
How long have those ISTATs been around? Because I was at a conference 10, 12 years ago, and I remember them trying to sell the EMS at that time.
At least 20 years from what I understand, talking to the rep.
Oh, wow. Really? Okay.
Yeah.
The hospitals have been using for a long time, mostly in CT, so they can get that immediate creatinine level, so they can go ahead and do that immediate CT of the head.
And it was very little blood, too, if I recall.
It's literally less than 0.1 cc to do all of the exams.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, it's literally a drop of blood for troponin. We can get immediate lactic acid for sepsis patients. If we suspect this as a sepsis patient, we can already get past our sears. We can get a lactic level if it's over 2. We automatically know they need massive fluid boluses and have them standing by with antibiotics.
Wow.
We miss sepsis patients in EMS exponentially because A, training, and B, we don't have the equipment. How many ambulance companies or ambulance services out there carry a thermometer that's worth a hoot?
Oh, there you go.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, they feel warm, they might be septic. Well, it's that respiratory rate, blood pressure, and heart rate. But everybody goes, the sepsis only has a fever, and it's really not true. But if you have that lactic already run, you can 100% go ahead and say, this is a sepsis patient. If we reverse it now, we're not going to put them into urosepsis. We're just going to get them into an infectious inflammatory response.
I'm impressed, Paige. I am really impressed with all that you're saying. It's a lot that's over my head. I am really impressed with your knowledge there on those.
Remind us not to bring Paige back on to make us all look stupid.
Yeah, you're making us look bad.
But honestly, she does it to me in class every day, Pat.
I don't mean to do it.
I'm just kidding, Paige. You're awesome. She's I'm telling you. And I know she gets tired of me, but I'm always, Paige, what is that I'm talking about? The so-and-so? And she's like, Mike, I cannot read your mind. And I'm like, I know, but you can't. She
And
is
eventually I get
so
that,
wealth of knowledge.
Hey, as long as you can explain preload and afterload with the toilet, we're good.
I'm again impressed that y'all are, all three of you are a great blessing to our training department. You really are.
Well, we finally got you at least at headquarters, Pat.
Yeah.
We had been fighting and fighting, and I was begging Chief. I said, just transfer him. Don't give him a choice. But they wouldn't do it. And then finally, we got you up here, and we're glad to have you too. Look at it's holding up.
Even though
we went over with our EMT class today, I was struggling explaining preload and afterload to some 19, 20-year-old, 21-year-old kids, and I was working, trying to twist it around, coming up, and Paige is like, "Well, I might be able to help you. I've got this. What do you think?" And she showed me the toilet, and I said, "For some reason, Paige, I think they'll get it," and they did. I think that was huge.
Fantastic. Wow.
Yeah,
it was
funny because it's something they can relate to.
I wanna give you guys two guys props. You guys have taken this EMT program to levels it's never been before. Not to say that the previous instructors were bad. You guys have just taken it to a whole different level.
Thank you.
I'm sure your students are going to appreciate that.
Yeah, earlier when y'all said, we're teaching preload and afterload, I was like, what? That's like paramedic level.
That was paramedic level when we went to school, but now that's EMT level.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
That is EMT level.
I don't remember preload and afterload in EMT school back in 1990 something.
Right. No, we never. Yeah, we didn't. We never got that. I didn't get that until I went to paramedic school. What about you, Paige?
I got a little bit because I went through intermediate 99.
Okay.
The update, so it did talk about it because they're talking about us giving more medications and things like that. But it was literally, here's preload, here's afterload, here's Frank Starling, and this is what blood pressure means, cystic damage, SVR, and poof, you're done. And it was literally an hour and a half out of the year-long program and however many hours. And it was just, okay, go on. Because at that point, it was more about skills. Can you do an assessment versus do you know what's going on? And it wasn't for years later. I was like, oh, I know what's going on inside versus, hey, I found the problem.
Yeah.
I feel bad for Starling.
Feel bad for who?
Related to a rubber band.
Yeah. That was something else we were talking about. Paige brought in a rubber band today to class, and so she was demonstrating it, and I was Frank Starling's law. And I said, poor Frank Starling's, here he is, spent years probably researching this more in, more out theory. And, well, we summed it up in about 5 minutes shooting rubber bands across the room. So that was another Riggs idea there. Good job. It really was, though. And that's one thing that you have to do. And I don't know, I think we're doing pretty good, but I think we need to always try to do better, is trying to present this information in a way that they'll learn the information. It's not always through lecture.
Oh,
Lecture, I lose them maybe sometimes 35 minutes into it. And so you have to shock and awe and try to figure out ways. And then when I need shock and awe, I say, Paige, hey, can you come in the classroom for a minute? And she will definitely shock and awe them.
She did it today.
She did, didn't she?
We talked about a preload, and then you have to flush it and make a contraction after you dump off the load.
There.
After load later.
Oh, man.
The Browns have left the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
I remember in that one part of her lecture, she said, so if the diameter of the pipe is about 3 inches, and you change it to like 1.5 inches, and one of the students is like, oh, you're going to have problems. And I knew then they were really getting it when at that point, I was like, they're getting it.
You try to flush that much down, it's not going.
Oh, man. Well, look, I want to thank everybody for being here. I think this has been a great first show.
Absolutely.
I think we should get together maybe next week
Okay.
and get with everybody's schedule. And let's do it for a few weeks and see if nothing else, we get to talk to each other about this. I love talking about this.
Mm-hmm.
And we get deeper into it. Maybe if we get this out here, especially about what Paige was talking about pre-hospital setting, getting lab work. I mean, I did hear about that stuff a long time ago, but I didn't know that that was so accessible now. And it can do everything. And we get people talking about these issues. And who knows, maybe we'll have that stuff one day.
I think it's coming.
It'll happen.
It's coming. I just think it needs to be made a little bit more affordable. Those machines are still $75,000 a piece.
Wow.
And reimbursement is an issue, but if we bring that education point back in where we say they're all now associate levels, we've gone over this, they now understand blood work better, then we can say they understand this is a positive troponin, they understand this is a positive lactic, their creatinine level's normal, they can have this CT with contrast, and we increase awareness, and then we allow people to do more because they have more education.
There you go.
Yep.
And I agree with you more. Fidel, any last words?
Nope, I had a great time. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Fidel. We'll get your mic fixed next time. Bring that thing to work. We'll play with it.
Yeah, I'll bring it tomorrow.
All right.
All right, Pat, thank you for coming. We'll see. You're welcome to come back next week, okay?
Oh, Mike, I love it. I could do this all day.
Great. That'd be awesome.
All right.
Thank everybody for your time. We'll see you next week.
All right. Thank you.
Signing off. We need.